I'm Karen Schuckman, and this is the Lesson 1 Lab Tutorial Number 1 for Geography 481. Each lab in this course will follow a similar format. In the Canvas lesson module, you'll find a PDF with written lab instructions that you should refer to as you go step by step through the lab activity. You'll also find some tutorials in VoiceThread that should be quite helpful if you watch them prior to attempting to do the lab. They will give you some important background and guidance that will help you follow the step-by-step instructions. You'll find the lab data as a zip file. These may be quite large, so you should check the size of the file, which is indicated in the Canvas module, and take that into account based on the speed of your internet download. And then finally, you'll submit the deliverable as a Canvas quiz. Each lab will consist of two parts. The first part will be a training exercise designed by the LP360 vendor, QCoherent, and this is mainly intended to just teach you how to use the tools in the software. Then you'll be getting a second part of the lab that I have written, which is applying these new skills to a different data set and asking questions that pertain to the learning objectives for the lesson. So for preparation, I would skim the written lab instructions, I would watch the lab tutorials, download the data, and then begin the work. At the highest level, our objectives this week are to prepare your local workspace for this lab and the rest of the course, to also confirm that everyone is using exactly the same version of the software. In this class, it's absolutely necessary that everyone be using the same versions of ArcGIS Desktop as well as LP360. And then we'll get introduced to the basic LiDAR capabilities of each software package. Managing your data is going to be a challenge throughout this course. I recommend that you identify now a workspace where you have at least 50 gigabytes of free space. This will allow you to save copies of the original data downloads in zip format, as well as the unzipped files and any new data that you create. Also, this should be on a local internal hard drive. It could be a different drive letter other than C if you have multiple hard drives on your computer, but it should not be a removable or flash drive. I do recommend that you use a removable or flash drive to keep a second copy as a backup of all of your work for the course. Furthermore, I would suggest that you keep your path names as short as possible, so create a folder for this course at the root level of the hard drive that you're using, such as D://GEOG 481, and then create individual folders for each lesson under that. So lesson 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Remember, do not use any spaces in your folder names. And then finally create one folder for the LP360 training materials under the same course directory. This is an example of how I've created my folders. Notice in my screenshot you can see extensions after each of the files listed in my folder. For example, Nashville.cpg, Nashville.dbf. Showing file extensions in Windows by default is turned off, and you should turn that back on for this course because being able to distinguish files by their extension in Windows Explorer is going to be very important for organizing your data. So to do this, go to Windows Explorer in the upper left-hand corner, the Organize button. Click that and select Folder and Search options. Select the View tab and then go down to the box that says Hide Extensions for Known File Types and uncheck that box. At this point, if you're following along in the written instructions, you'll see that I'm basically repeating some of the material that's presented there. Before you get started on the lab, you're going to want to make sure you've downloaded all the appropriate files. You're going to need 6 files from the LP360 Resources module. We'll be using these throughout all of the lessons. And then some Lesson 1 specific data, the lab instructions, the PDF, and the lab data. This is what my Lesson 1 data looks like unzipped in my Lesson 1 folder. Notice the file extensions are displayed. The zip file, you might want, if you have enough space, you can keep those in your lesson folders, or you could maybe copy those off to a flash drive if you want to save a little bit of space. But I would definitely hang on to them to avoid having to download them again later if for any reason you lose them or your data becomes corrupted and you want to start over. And this is what my LP360 training folder looks like after I've downloaded the 3 zip files, the various tool guides and so on, and organized them in my working folder. You should have received the referenced email during the first week of class in your psu.edu inbox. As long as your name was on the Canvas course roster on the day I sent out the announcements, then you would have received the email. When people have trouble finding it, it's usually because either it has been caught by a junk mail filter or they're not checking the correct inbox. The ESRI online training should be fairly self-explanatory. Pay attention to the following bullets, and when you're later on doing the comparison to LP360, you can see how these capabilities are handled differently in the 2 software packages. All of the LiDAR data for the LP360 training is provided in an ESRI compressed format. We're going to use the EasyLAS utility to convert that proprietary format to a standard LAS format that can be used in other software, including LP360. The remainder of Lab 1 will cover these basic utilities in both LP360 standalone and the plugin for ArcGIS. Here I've summarized a little of the metadata concerning the LP360 training dataset. This information is also provided in more detail in the LP360 training manual, which is included in the resources that you have for this course. The LiDAR data that we're going to be using for the LP360 training exercises has already been classified according to the scheme that you see here. There are some standard conventions for classification scheme, but not every data set follows that scheme. So it's always important to see exactly what class scheme has been used for every data set that you use.